So to me, a brilliant briefing is two things. It's firstly simple, and secondly inspiring. In my experience, they're the two things that you need. It's very easy to say, actually quite difficult to do. For me, they are the fundamental things that you need in a brilliant brief. So to get to a brilliant simple brief, I think you have to sacrifice the superfluous. You have to take everything away that doesn't matter. So cut it down, cut it in half, take out anything that is sort of seems interesting but is maybe not quite on the point, and try and make it as simple and brief as possible. The clues in the title, brief. A brilliant brief also will judo flip a complex business problem into a creative opportunity. So it distills everything down and turns it into something which you might not expect. It manages to survey quite a sort of chaotic battleground into a plan of attack. So there are often so many things going on in a client brief or in a situation in terms of the competition or a change in what the consumer's doing or a change in the market, and it's your job to kind of distill all of that into one kind of battle plan. Also, a brilliant brief will generally unlock a new way of seeing the world, which somehow felt obvious or should have been obvious, but suddenly seems obvious once you rip it down. That's the power of something really kind of simple. And also, as I kind of alluded to earlier, a brilliant brief takes the time to write a shorter letter. So sometimes I see briefs from our teams here where they've kind of made everything like into a smaller font in order to fit it onto the page. And I sort of would rather they took the time to just cut it down and cut it down again until it's just really, really, really simple. It's so easy to say, but it's genuinely difficult to do. As part of writing a shorter letter, another tip is to brilliantly simple brief just uses really simple language. So there was a philosopher, his name's Schopenhauer, and he said one should use common words to say uncommon things, and I think that brilliant briefs do just that, and it's why I read that Dave Trott had said that his rule of thumb for creative briefs is that the quality of thinking is inversely proportional to the complexity of the language, i.e. when you've got something really good, you don't masquerade it in complex language, you just get to the point because you want to show off how clever that thinking is. And it's very easy to hide behind quite complex language, things like engagement, things like awareness, and not really quite get to the heart of the issue. I've also got a few tests that I kind of use with our teams here in terms of what a brilliantly simple brief should pass. The first is the elevator test, which is basically can you brief it in 30 seconds. So generally, you'll get asked on the spot, what's the brief? Like, tell me the brief. And that might be by a client in the lift, it might be your boss, it might be a creative team, but to be able to deliver that brief in 30 seconds in terms of what we're really trying to do here is really important. Another test is the 8-year-old test, just because I have kids of that age, which is can you explain it to them and they'll get it instantly, in terms of if you dress it up too much or you make it too complicated, they just won't understand. And I think sometimes to dumb it down, like not to overthink it, is I think quite a key way to get to a really brilliantly simple brief. Similar to those elevator tests and the 8-year-old test is the beer mat test. So could you write it on a beer mat and go and brief it in the pub? I think there was a German agency, it might be Jung von Matt, who did just that and tried to encourage teams to write it on a beer mat and then go and brief it. And I think it's just a good discipline to really cut it down and make it as simple as it can possibly be. And then the final reason for saying that a brilliant brief should be brilliantly simple is that it's what creatives want. So some of the planners, when I was at A&V a few years ago, did a survey of the entire creative department, and they asked creative teams like, what are you looking for from a brief? And the number one thing that came out was simplicity. So just tell me the one thing I need to say. Like, keep it really simple. Don't try and overwrite it. Don't try and do my job. Just tell me it plain and simple. And I think that just kind of speaks volumes. Like, keeping it simple is just so important. There's a quote from T.S. Eliot, which I really like, which says, when forced to work within a strict framework, the imagination is taxed to its utmost and will produce its richest ideas. Given total freedom, the work is likely to sprawl. And anyone who's ever put an open brief into a creative department will know that, because creatives just don't know where to start. They love something that just very, very simply tells them what they're trying to do. So that's kind of a little section about simplicity. I think all the best briefs, brilliant briefs, are simple first and foremost. Creative briefs are a planner's currency. If you write brilliant briefs around an agency and you get known for that, I think your career will kind of fly from there. So it's our job to make them really inspiring, and I think a brilliant, inspiring brief is just never ever boring. It's just, it knows that people don't care about your brand and your brief, they care about their lives. And so I think a really good start point is just to assume that no one gives a shit about what you're working on and try and find something really interesting that's going to make them care. So also it knows that most advertising just totally goes unnoticed. So it's imperative that we kind of want to entertain people and get their attention and do something interesting, and that isn't just a brief to creatives, it's ultimately what we're trying to do for people in the real world. A brilliant, inspiring brief also knows that people are paying to avoid what we do for a living. So there's interesting stuff about, and I was talking to someone the other day about the fact that these subscription models for Netflix as an example, people are sort of paying that premium to not be advertised to. So people are paying to avoid it, people are buying and paying for ad blockers. So that's a problem for our industry. We've got to get back to doing really interesting, popular work that people actually enjoy watching and are entertained by. And it sounds like an old school thing to say, but that's what we need to be doing more and more of today. And also, an inspiring brief, I think, exquisitely defines an interesting problem. So it makes a problem so interesting and so poses a question that you just are itching to respond to. So it throws down a gauntlet, it sets a question, it invites creatives to kind of come and solve it and be interested in solving it. And so I think there's a kind of a skill to doing that. A brilliant, inspiring brief often takes a stance as well. So Bill Bernbach, quote, he said, if you have a point of view, people will either be for you or against you. If you don't, they'll simply ignore you. So the idea being that you've got to stand for something, you've got to be for something or against something so that people care and so that people engage. Often briefs now find a kind of cultural tension. So Crispin Porter were amazing at that back in the day, where they'd find a bit of a fight or a bit of an enemy to tap into. That's one way to make your brief more interesting. Another way is to not put the words positive, warm, friendly, human in the tone of voice box. Too often you see that, and it's like, who's going to say we're negative? Who's going to say we're robotic? It's very rare. So I think trying to find a more distinctive word in that box can sometimes unlock something. Think about what a creative would find exciting. So tell them something that they don't know. Like if you start by saying, look, you probably didn't know this, kind of pique their curiosity. Give them a kind of fact or an interesting thing or a new perspective on something. Like, don't just tell them what they probably already know. And also remember that a brief is something they should want to work off, not work to. So it should be a springboard, it should be a start point, it should be an invitation to go and do something amazing. And hopefully that then leads to the kind of inspiring creative work, which is why we all got into this industry in the first place. Like, we are a means to an end where we can help those creative types go and do something amazing, and that's our role in the process. So that's it. So I think briefs should be simple and they should be inspiring, those two things. So do creatives get it? Are they really excited? It's really easy to say, it's very difficult to do, but I think they're the kind of two tick boxes for me. And the only thing that I'd also add, because it was part of the question, is that it's not just about the brief. So here at Adam&eveDDB, we talk a lot about there's briefs and there's briefings. So yes, we write a brief in a template and we make sure we've got the right rigor there, but also it's about briefings and how we excite people and how we bring people along that journey and how we get them really interested in the brief. And so that can be where you brief it. So in my career, I've done briefings in the Honda factory, I've done briefings in St Pancras for Eurostar, I've done briefings in lounges for Virgin Atlantic. Like, sometimes that, just getting people out of the office can show that it's an interesting brief and it's worth their attention, just gets them out of the office and the day-to-day. Also, don't just read the brief out. Like, that's just one of my pet hates, is when people hand out the brief and then read it out, because people are already then reading it and they're not listening to you. So make it more of a briefing, or give them the brief at the end, like present it, talk about it, make it a bit more theatrical, and then give them the summary of the brief. And just try and make it memorable, like invade their brains, get them thinking about it, add thought starters, just make it one of those things that when they're a couple of days later and they've got a few different briefs that they're working on, they really want to work on yours because it just feels like it's simple and inspiring. And the final thing I'd say is just like remember energy and positive energy when you're briefing. Like fill that room with kind of optimism, get people excited, because if you're not excited about it, it's kind of, why should they be?